Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we're talking about positive and negative integers. For today, our objectives will be to define negative and positive integers, to order negative and positive integers from least to greatest, and to be able to identify and apply the rules of operations with positive and negative integers, including for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So first, we're going to start with ordering integers. Now, an integer is a whole number, and it could be either positive or negative. So anything that's a negative integer means it's below 0. And anything that's a positive integer is above 0. So you'll see on this number line, I think this is an easier way to think about integers and to imagine them. If you think about that 0 is the midpoint, it's like a mirror from there on either side. You see the 1 and the negative 1. You see the 2 and the negative 2. And they continue to move out like a mirror on both sides. Now, the negative numbers, you'll notice that the lowest numbers are actually bigger in negative terms. So if I see the number 10 and the number 1, I think, wow, the number 10 is much bigger than the number 1. But if there's a negative sign, negative 10 is actually much smaller. I hope this visual gives you something to work off of, and I'd encourage you, if you're working with positive and negative numbers, especially at the beginning, to draw out this timeline while you're working on it, so that way you'll have something to reference as you're working, especially on that multiplication, divisions, addition, subtraction. This can be a good reference tool. Let's get into some of the operations with integers. So for integers, if you see add, you have a couple of rules for adding, a couple of rules of subtracting, and some rules of multiplying and dividing. Here we have an overview. For example, for adding, we know that there are different rules if you have the same sign, like both of the numbers are negative, or if you have different signs. One number is negative, one number is positive. For subtracting, we actually have to change some of the symbols and then go and use the adding rules. And then multiplying and dividing, we have two different rules, whether you have the same signs or if you have different signs. So this is a good reference page if you want to screenshot this or write these down. This is a quick guide, but we're going to go into more detail on these next slides. So for adding integers, if we have the same sign, so both the numbers are positive or both the numbers are negative, the same sign means that we add the numbers together and then we take whatever sign is there. So if we see positive 9 plus positive 9, that means that we're going to have the two numbers added together, which is 18, and that 18 is going to also be positive because we keep the sign. If we have a negative 9 plus a negative 9, that actually means that we're going to keep that negative sign, and we're going to add the 9 and 9 together to get 18, so our number here will be negative 18. So again, just add the numbers together, and whatever shared sign they already have, you keep that sign. If it's a different sign, we have a different set of rules. So for a different sign, you need to subtract and take the sign of the largest absolute value. Okay, so a couple steps here. First of all, what is absolute value? Well, you'll see down at the bottom that it says absolute value means the value of a number without the sign attached to it. So the absolute value of negative 60 and the absolute value of positive 60 are both just 60. It's kind of like thinking, if you look at that number line, how many units would I have to move from 0 to get to that number? So if you were trying to get from 0 to negative 60, you'd have to move 60 times. If you were trying to get from 0 to positive 60, you'd have to move 60 times. So the value, the absolute value of that number is 60 units. So when we talk about absolute value, we're not thinking about whether this is that negative or positive and which side of the number line it's on. We just need to look at which one is the larger number without any signs, right? So let's take a look at the first one. So it says we need to subtract the numbers and take the sign of the largest value. So this one says 10 plus negative 3. So different signs, right? With a negative 3 and we have a 10. So because they're different, I'm going to say, okay, instead of adding, I'm actually just going to subtract. So it's going to be 10 minus 3. When the answer then is 7. But it says, which sign do we take? Well, it has to be the one that has the largest absolute value. So the absolute value of 10 is 10, and the absolute value of -3 is 3. So 10 has the larger value there. So we're going to keep that positive. Now let's switch it. Let's say we have -10 plus 3. Okay, well now we need to say subtract, right? So we're going to subtract our two numbers. We're not worried about signs right now. And then we're going to take the sign of the largest absolute value. So 10 minus 3, right? We're doing that same work, and it's a 7. But this time, our largest absolute value number, which is still at 10, has a negative sign. So we're going to take that sign and put it on our final answer, -7. Now, for addition subtraction, it might also be easier to get these things into your mind if you think about them in terms of that number line. So let's imagine that you have that number line and you start on the far side at -10. Well, if you're adding, getting closer to the positives, right, by adding +3, all adding is gonna move over to the right. So I would go -10, -9, -8, -7. There's our answer. So these are rules that you can apply to all types of adding integers and all sizes of numbers. But when you're getting started on this concept, it may be easier to work with that timeline just to make sure you're getting that visual and concept in your head. For subtracting integers, we're going to do some of the same stuff that we did on our last slide with adding, but this time we have an extra step. So it's first, we need to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. Then we need to change the number after the subtraction sign to the opposite. So if that number after that subtraction sign that we just changed to an addition sign was positive, we need to make it negative. And if it was negative, we need to make it positive. And then we'll follow the rules for addition. So let's start with this one. This says -12 minus 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my subtraction sign to an addition sign. And then I'm going to change that 3, which comes after the sign, to the opposite. So we keep the -12. I changed my subtraction to a plus. And then I did have a +3 there. So I'm going to change that to a -3. So now we have -12 plus -3. Now remember, if we have the same sign, which now we do because we're adding these two, and we have a -12, -3, we add the numbers together and then we keep the sign. So what's 12 plus 3? It's 15. The sign is negative, so our answer is -15. Now, if we have a different sign, again, we're going to follow those rules. So let's take a look at this next one. Let's say we had -12 minus -3. Well, we're going to take the same steps, right? We keep our -12, we're going to change the minus to a plus, and we're going to do the opposite with the 3. So because it was -3, now it's a +3. That means we have different signs in our addition, because now we have a -12 and a +3. So we're going to subtract, and we're going to take the sign of the largest absolute value. So 12 minus 3 is 9, and the largest absolute value here would be 12. Right? So that has a negative sign attached to it, so we're going to keep that negative sign in our final answer. So the answer would be -9. Multiplying and dividing integers has a couple of rules that go for both, and we'll look at examples with both. So if you have two numbers that have the same sign, then your answer is going to be positive. And if you have two numbers with different signs, your answer is going to be negative. But otherwise, you will just multiply and divide like you normally would. So let's look at -5 times -4. So we are going to do that just as we normally would. Think about 5 times 4, which is 20. But we have the same sign, negative and negative. So when it's the same, the answer is going to come out positive. So our answer is just 20. Same thing with division. If I have a +20 divided by a +5, same sign on both. So my answer is going to be 4, and it's going to remain positive. Now, if we have two different signs, so a -5 times 4 equals -20. because the different signs mean that we get a negative answer. Now, same thing with division. If we do 20 divided by -5, because we have two different signs, we get that answer 4, but we have to put negative in front of it to get -4 because we have that -5 and a +20. So if we see a mix, it goes negative. If we see the same sign, it goes positive. Thank you so much for watching with me today and learning something new about multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction of positive and negative integers. I hope that you will continue to check out the Helms Academy by subscribing to our YouTube channel below. And you can look at us on Instagram, on Facebook, and at helmsacademy.org.